Jaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha. So we are continuing from where we left. It's been a long time almost a month, since we last discussed the biography of Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. And the topic that was being discussed was the concept of avatara. What is an incarnation? What are the characteristics of an incarnation? And there can be several objections because when you discuss it from the point of view of Advaita Vedanta, the concept of avatara is not acceptable to them. So there are some objections, and the objections have been answered by Swami Sarvasthananda because the different systems of thought that we come across in uh, Vedanta, the different aspects of Vedanta or the different schools of Vedanta, though apparently they are contradictory in nature, they could be understood. The concepts can be understood if we see the different levels of consciousness that these truths are viewed, the different levels from which they are viewed. So, a reader who is well versed in Bhagavad Gita or who has accepted Shankara's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he may object because in the Gita, trying to explain the concept of avatara, Sri Shankaracharya says that according to Advaita, since this creation is a mere illusion or from the non-dual plane, which is pure consciousness, the created world, the world that is created, preserved, and destroyed, it is, he's trying to explain it by saying that it is as if he is born. When you discuss everything in the realm of Maya, since changing things come under the purview of the created world, which according to non-dualists is a mere illusion. The example that is given is that while you are dreaming, no matter how much you feel the dream to be real, when you wake up, that dream simply vanishes, and the dream world with all its objects, including the people whom you encounter, the events that unfold in the dream, do not seem to be real when you wake up. So also, the God is in reality. Shankaracharya tries to explain it when he comments on the Gita, when Sri Krishna says that I take birth in different ages to uphold dharma. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati. Whenever there is adharma prevails in society, I incarnate to support dharma and maintain the balance in the universe. So Shankaracharya now is in a predicament because according to Advaita Vedanta, from the non-dual viewpoint, if he wants to explain the Gita, he has to explain it this way. God is in reality, I'm quoting part of his commentary. God is in reality unborn, unchanging, the Lord of all created beings, and by nature is eternal, pure, illumined, and free. But he is seen as though born, just as in a dream world, though everything is seen, everything is perceived, and a dreamer feels that the dream is absolutely real till he wakes up. For him, the objects of dream, the feelings, the emotions that are involved, everything seems to be so real. But it vanishes when he wakes up. So, though the Lord of all created beings obviously is eternal, he is uncreated, he is pure, and that is how the non dualists describe. Brahman or the eternal nature of reality or Brahman. But he's seen as though he's born, as though endowed with a body, and that is through his own Maya power, which is supported by Sri Krishna when he says, by using the power of my Maya, I create all these beings and then who are in me, who work in and through me, and also are dissolved in me. So that is how he says the incarnation, he appears as if he is born for the benefit of humanity, to preserve dharma and to destroy adharma. Now, the people who argue against the concept of incarnation, against the concept of godhood of man, the different prophets who come. So, how can you hold that as true? How can you establish that as true? So, the answer Swami Sardananji is giving here is that if we consider the incarnation as a mere illusion, that presupposes that the human beings, for a non-dualist, even the body has to be unreal. The self has the one's own body. When that feeling of bodilessness comes, then only you reach the pinnacle of non-dual Vedanta. As long as you have any sort of body consciousness, you cannot be called an Advaitin. So it's a realization, it's an experience of non-duality comes only when the body consciousness is has vanished. For such a person, if he says the incarnation is unreal because he has woken up from the dream, so he can say, but he has to experience that his own existence is unreal. If he can say that the body is unreal, and if he reaches that state at that level of consciousness, he can say the incarnation, the concept of incarnation is just a concept. It's a kind of illusion as a waking person. On waking up, thinks that the dream that he saw, which was real when he dreamt, is an illusion. But then he has to accept that fact and he has to accept the fact if the incarnation is unreal, then he himself is unreal. So the previous statement still stands. Now, Swami Shraddhanji is trying to explain from another angle. He says the scriptures speak of two types of ideas of the about the world. One is look the world as it appears from the non-dualist's eyes. A person who is a non-dualist sees the world in one particular way because he has raised his consciousness to that plane. So it's a question of the level of consciousness that a person has evolved. If a person, yesterday we discussed Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, where we say we begin with the physical possibilities, then we go to the mental possibilities, then we go to the possibilities at the level of buddhi, which is intuitive possibilities, and then that is how we discover or uncover layer after layer as our consciousness increases, as our perception increases, the level of the consciousness behind our perception changes, we perceive the world in a different way. For example, Swami Vivekananda says in his famous Jnana Yoga lectures which he delivered in London, that how is it possible? He, for example, gives a very scientific explanation. He says you have five senses or six senses which you are using now. You see the world in one way. Suppose one of the senses is disabled, a blind man, for example. He perceives the world in a totally different way. His perceptions give him a different idea of reality than what a person with all the six senses functioning sees the world. He sees the world in a different way. So also if one is deaf, dumb, and also blind, then he has his own perception of what the world is. So the reality changes according to the level from which we observe it. So, Brahman is one without a second, it is eternal, but the consciousness, the level of consciousness that a sadhaka or a person, spiritual aspirant has to reach to experience that truth is very high. So, for him, for a person who has realized the non-dual Brahman, as Shankaracharya says, the world is nothing but an aggregate of names and forms, nama rupa, they say. So what happens is all these uh, things that they perceive includes the avatars and incarnations and prophets. For them, there is no use for the prophets and avatars because they are as unreal as their own bodies. But the essential condition is that their jivahood they have to negate. They have to firmly be established in the thought. The mind has to be raised to such a level, or the buddhi has to be raised to such a level of consciousness where the existence of the body itself appears like an illusion. It's a very high state which uh, is not possible for an ordinary human being who has body consciousness to attain. So Advaita as a theory, though it appeals to many people because it does not involve God. Normally, listening to YouTube talks and people think Advaita is a very simple thing. No doubt it is a simple thing for rationalists to understand and to accept because it does not presuppose the existence of a prophet or a god or a book, a sacred book. It says just reasoning can take you beyond uh, reality to the highest plane, and they find intellectually at least they are convinced that this is the philosophy I was looking for because I don't have to presuppose or have faith in any personal God or any personal prophet or any book. So that is the path of jnana. It appeals to many people. That is why they uh, watching all these wonderful videos expounding Advaita. It's very easy to get convinced, but it's very difficult to experience the truth of Advaita. So Advaita is an experience, and Advaita as a system of thought are entirely different things. No matter how much you get convinced of the truth of non-dual nature of Brahman, it may appeal to your, there may be wonderful arguments, but the moment a thorn pricks and if you feel the body consciousness brings you to the plane of duality. So as long as you consider this world that you see around you to be real, then you cannot be established in the highest non-dual Advaitic truth. Of course, those who are liberated, those who are Jivan Muktas, according to Advaita, they live in this world, but their mind is always, they have to force themselves to come to the dualistic world and to explain things. But they always, at will or at their own choice, they can choose to remain in the non dualistic plane. And then, just as the example that the only example that can make us uh, understand or appreciate this is the daily phenomena of waking and dream and deep sleep. So, analyzing these three states where we are going always, we are either dreaming, whether it's a daydream or a real dream when we sleep, or we are in a deep sleep state where even the dreams stop, and or when we are fully awake, we are in the waking state. These states we they alternate in our life. So, taking that as a cue, Advaita Vedanta, some of the Upanishads have a long discussion to find out how reality changes according to the state in which we find ourselves. In a dream state, no matter how much the true the waking state is, the person who is dreaming or he has a nightmare or is a pleasant dream, he thinks all the emotions, every reaction that he has is as good as the reactions he has when he is in the waking state. Because for him, that dream state is absolutely real. It requires that he come out of that dream state to understand and appreciate the waking state. So, because most of the prophets or those who have realized the non-dual truth, they live most of their lives on that non-dualistic plane. So whenever they come down to a dualistic plane, for them, this world is unreal. That is why Buddha, whether it is Buddha after reaching Nirvana, Shankaracharya after he reached the state of non-duality, or Krishna or any great prophet, for them, it's easy for them to be detached and disassociate themselves from the problems and sufferings of the world because they consider it, they are convinced it is a mere dream. It is just like when you wake up, no matter how much the nightmare has caused anxiety in you, when you wake up, you are relieved that it was after all a dream, nothing after all not true. But if you suppose you have that feeling that even while you are dreaming, you have a full consciousness of the waking state and you know that you are dreaming, that the dream is unreal, then you are not affected by that dream. So that can be a way of explaining what these Jivan Muktas, that is what Shankaracharya says. So when compared to the waking state, a dream appears to be unreal. Similarly, the perception of the world in the minds of these incarnations or prophets, those who have realized the non-dual truth or those who have reached that eternal truth, people like Buddha who have reached nirvana, for them, suffering does not exist. That is why they say suffering exists, but they do not, they consider it to be an illusion. That is why when Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from cancer and he was feigning, or not feigning, but he was, when he came to the non dualistic plane, he would feel, he would allow the doctors to examine him. But then Swami Turiyananda, somehow, when his mind was in his disciple, one of his disciples, Swami Turiyananda, when he saw Sri Ramakrishna, he somehow saw that no matter Sri Ramakrishna is complaining about his pain in the throat and telling the doctor this, that, he seemed to detect that occasionally, not occasionally, most very often, Sri Ramakrishna would be showing expressions of joy amidst this suffering. So one day he said, no matter how much you are trying to show that you have pain and all, I can see a strange kind of joy which comes out of detachment from the body. Then Sri Ramakrishna appreciates that. Said, oh, you could see through it. That means not that they don't feel the pain, that is what Swami Shardanand is trying to explain. That depending on the level of consciousness they descend down to. In fact, the word avatara in Hindi or in Sanskrit, avatarana means to come down to the state, to a lower state of consciousness for the benefit of the world, so that they can interact with us. It's like a person who is, while he's waking, he goes in the dream state and he interacts with all the people in the dream, which is real when he is dreaming. So, similarly, the perception of the world in the minds of avatars, the world as they see and the world as we see, they cannot be regarded as absolutely unreal. Because from the point of Advaita, yes, the dream is unreal, the world is unreal as the dream is unreal. But when you are experiencing it from the dream level, it is absolutely it you cannot say it's absolutely unreal. So there is logic when dualists say that we would like to interact with our incarnation, with our Ishtadevata, the god and goddess that I worship. I want it to be, I want that deity to be absolutely real, as loving as a father or a mother, whatever relationship I develop with him. That is why you see these wonderful emotions associated with Krishna, Lord Krishna, when he was looked upon by different people in different relationships. Each one was equally true and equally valid. Yashoda looked upon Krishna as Bal Gopala. For her, he was not, though he tried now and then he would show his Vishwarupa as he showed it to Krishna, as he showed it to Arjuna. He would show Yashoda. But in spite of all those visions, the glorious visions she had, she still preferred to call him her child, though he was a foster child. She was a foster mother, but she still considered him, she loved him as her own child. So she did not want the divine relationship or the divine nature of Sri Krishna. She still held on to that human nature because that human nature, from the consciousness, from that level of consciousness, from the dualistic perspective, is as real as the relationship a person has when he comes to the non-dual consciousness. So once Hanuman was asked, Hanuman was a very much dedicated and a devotee of Sri Rama. So once Rama asks him a question, how do you look upon me? So the answer he gives is so wonderful. Rama says, when I think of myself as a body, I am your servant and you are my master. I serve you. But when I look upon myself, when my consciousness is raised, and when I consider myself not as a mere body but also or as a mind, then I am part of you. You are the universal mind, and my small mind is a part of that universal mind, eternally connected to you. But when I consider myself as the pure soul, then there is hardly any difference between us because as ultimate reality, we are one. There is no difference. So at different levels, the the same Brahman, he appears to be Brahman, ever free, ever unattached, absolute, the non-dualistic plane, and the mind of a sadhaka passes from lower, he starts considering God as a human being. Well, that is the highest conception he can have with his human mind. So when he worships, Swami Sarvasthananda says, the aspirant's conception of the Lord whom he worships changes. So in the Rig Veda, there is a verse, Kasmai Devaya Havisha Vidhema. So the people, the ancestors, our rishis, they were nature worshippers. The conception of God has evolved over centuries. So they started worshipping nature. They started with fire worship, which you can find even in Zoroastrians, which is an offshoot of the Vedic culture. All the Havana, all the yajnas that we do is because they revered creation around them. All the great forces which they were using, which helped them to survive, like fire, like sun, like water. So everything that they saw around, on whom they depended for their very existence or sustenance, they worshipped. So they worshipped the fire and then offered whatever they could gather, whatever they thought is best. They offered to the fire god. That is why we offer ghee and all sorts of butter, clarified butter to the fire, because fire worship is the most ancient form of worship. So as they went on worshipping, the question of some wise rishis asked this question. I am doing this worship because my ancestors taught me. I am doing it. But where are my oblations? Because it's not just clarified butter. They offered so many things. The rituals became more and more elaborate, and many valuable things were offered in the fire, huge fire that they lit. And also they worshipped water, they worshipped the trees, every object that they found around them. It started with nature worship, but the question still was disturbing them. Kasmai Devaya, they consider fire to be a god. Agni Deva, Varuna Deva, there are so many. Vayu, that is air around them without which they cannot survive. So they try to deify these natural forces and try to worship them. But then the question arose, who is the real God whom I am worshipping? I am offering oblations to the fire, but where does it ultimately go? Who is the real God to whom, uh, for whom these oblations, Havisha means the oblations, Videma. I am offering it, I am giving it, but I do not know where all these offerings will ultimately, who is accepting these offerings? Is there a God beyond fire, beyond water, beyond the objects that I am worshipping, beyond the image that I am worshipping? So slowly the idea of personal God who to the rishi who composed this verse, it was he was wondering whether the deity whom he is worshipping is the ultimate one. Is that deity were accepting it, or is there some higher deity to whom the oblations that I offer are reaching? So this quest of trying to find out the true nature of the God whom you are worshipping. For example, when we worship a particular aspect of God, it's just a picture. We have different artists drawing the picture of Krishna or Jesus because we don't have, even if we have photographs, it is one particular state, like Sri Ramakrishna's photo has been taken on a particular day, in a particular state, in how he looked on that particular day. So that is a likeness of his form that we worship. But is he that? He's far beyond that. The Krishna that we worship is an artist's imagination of what Krishna looked like. So, in truth, he is something beyond that. The subtle form of the deity whom we worship, the Jesus whom we worship, the Buddha whom we worship, the likeness of him, the real essence of Buddha, the real essence of Christ, or real essence of Rama, Krishna, and all the gods whom we worship, is not necessarily the form that we worship. The name and form that we use to worship him leads us to a state which is beyond name and form. So the goal is always, whichever God you start, it is like an example is given that suppose you are confined inside a big house. Now that house, if you want to go out in the open, there are various ways. You can go through the main door, you can go through one of the windows. If it is open, you can jump out, or you can go by the back door or the side door. So these doors were compared to these great forms, these great personalities who give you a peep into the eternal reality, which is the infinite reality. So our Vedas, they said, don't stop at the form. You may begin with a form, but don't end with the form. That form is just a door, a doorway, which will leads you out to the infinite space that is outside. The infinite space or the infinite reality that is outside is something beyond our comprehension. But the as our consciousness is raised, we start from Gopala. For example, now and then Yashoda used to see baby Gopala as a child in flesh and blood, but now and then he would reveal his divine nature as he revealed to Arjuna in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where he showed his Vishwarupa, that is his real form, in different aspects of uh, his own form. And Arjuna was so taken aback, or he was so surprised that he says, no, 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 please withdraw your form. I would like to see the Krishna that I normally see as a human being. That is more than enough. I don't want to see, because it was so terrifying, that aspect, that huge vision that he had, the different aspects. He just gave a small glimpse of what that reality can really be. So he said, you please withdraw the form. I'm happy with the human form that I am familiar with. You are like my friend, like my friend, philosopher, and guide. I'm happy with that form. You please withdraw because it is too much for me. So the subtle form that aspirant perceives, leading to the formless aspect of the God whom he is worshipping. Ultimately, it will be formless, the eternal reality, the non dual plane, but till he reaches, he accepts his God at different levels in different conceptions or the different visions of God that he has. These different subtle forms, they keep changing. They may not be the same to different aspirants. The same worshipper of Krishna, there may be a few worshippers of God who may have different visions of him. It's not necessary that all visions will tally. That's why we find all the Christian mistakes or the Buddhist or all the different schools of Buddhism and Hinduism. They are describing reality in different ways. There's no contradiction and there's no need to quarrel because my conception of God is my own, depending on the consciousness to which I've raised my mind by my effort. And there's no reason why it should tally with somebody else's experience. That's why the contradiction, if we quarrel and say that my experience is the only true experience, then it leads to different sectarian gods and goddesses, and then we quarrel about them, and then that is the reason why religion has got such a bad name. Because if a group of people say our experiences or the experiences of our uh, sacred people, the prophet or whoever it is, saints, is the ultimate experience, and you have to experience exactly the same, then there is a problem because then you don't agree with somebody else's experience, some other tradition, other saint who at a different level of consciousness has experienced truth in a different way because they are at different stages. We cannot even say whose stage is higher or lower. We travel from lower truth to higher truth. That is what Vedanta says. That as the ordinary person approaches a deity with faith and devotion, in the initial stages, it is just faith and devotion. He just considers his deity as somebody who can bestow upon him a vision of God which he doesn't know. What is the vision? As the Rishi said, Kasmai Devaya Havisha Videma. I'm offering, but I don't know the God, the exact form of God, or the exact nature of God to whom my oblations, to all my offerings, the puja that we do, it becomes meaningless if we do not aspire to know what happens. Otherwise, it's just a ritual. We offer most of the time, people, there's a joke, we said, what the things that we like, we offer because it's going to come back to us. And after all, we are going to eat it. We are least bothered what happens to the offering, what is the spiritual significance of that offering. But because we are so gross, we think if we offer, because anyway it will come back as a sacrament or prasad or some kind of sacred thing. And then we can enjoy that because whatever we offer, good or bad, it's going to come back to us. So offer something good. So ultimately the prasad. So the idea that the oblation or the purpose or the significance behind these rituals is to outgrow these rituals. At some stage, we have to outgrow these things. If we stay in the kindergarten of religion, Vivekananda said, that is like a kindergarten. You need to pass through the kindergarten to go to higher, graduate to higher classes and finally get your degree and then do masters and then do PhD. So also a aspirant may begin with rituals, but if he gets stuck at that ritual level, he is in the kindergarten of religion. So that is why this divinity, the aspirants of divinity, has to be has to change. If the spirit aspirant is really making an effort to practice spiritual disciplines the way the tradition has told him to do, based on the experiences of the saints, the different prophets, and the different incarnations who have showed the way. Their only purpose is to come down to our plane to show us what are the different techniques that one need to use. How does a person, he or she, control his or her mind and raise the level of consciousness? That is what Patanjali Yoga Sutras is all about. He says it is a very scientific method where through the process of systematic yoga, you follow a particular method, just as a scientist follows the different various methods to get experimental verification of the truths he wishes to establish. He doesn't know, he has to establish certain truths, and if the experiments are successful, then his postulate or his ideas that he has put forward can be considered as established theories. There's no shortcut. One has to show evidence of the or experimental verification. So also in spiritual life, these various stages which people or which great saints have encountered in their own life, they are time tested. They can be tested. If they say that it's only once or one group of people who can see those things or experience those things, then it is not scientific. For example, you don't say that the laboratory experiments you do is not valid in some other country. It has to be valid for any person who uses the same methods and the same materials. You can't say that it's valid here, it's not valid somewhere else, or if somebody else experiments, it won't, it's a one time thing. So, science does say that the same experiment, when you repeat again and again, will produce the same result. So, that is how devotion to God, as it has been explained in the various scriptures, they the idea of God, which a humble devotee begins with a simple idea of God that he has. It may be very rudimentary, he offers whatever he can. But then as his consciousness expands, he says the earlier vision is not wrong. The vision with which he began his spiritual journey cannot be wrong, because at that level of consciousness he saw, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that you see the sun in a particular sun or a moon, any celestial object, but if you just travel towards that object, it increases in size. So you get different pictures. He used to give another beautiful example of an elephant. He said four blind people were encountered an elephant which was tied, and then they were asked to find out and describe the elephant. Elephant is a huge animal. So the four blind men went in different directions. Somebody touched the leg of the elephant and he exclaimed, "Oh, now I can," because the sense of touch was the only thing with which he could measure or experience the elephant. So having explored the only the leg of the elephant, he said, "Oh, the elephant is like a pillar." And the other blind man happened to catch hold of the trunk of the elephant. So he said, no, it's like a hose pipe or it's like a pipe. It is flexible, it's not like a pillar. And they started quarreling because he was, and the other person somehow managed to touch the ear of the elephant. He said, no, it's like a willow fan, it's like a fan, or it's like something. And somebody, the other person just managed to hold the tail. So he thought that was the elephant. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that we all quarrel, we are like these blind men, and think that our experience of God is the only experience. So you cannot put a limit to the experience that a person has. As he grows in spirituality, his experience may change, and that will allow for a certain kind of Catholicity among the followers of different religions or within every religion. For example, within certain religions, there are certain tenets or certain dogmas or faiths that we hold as true. But that doesn't mean the other faiths or the or other ideas of or conceptions of God are untrue. From that level, from their level of perception, from their level of advancement or the level of consciousness, it's the level of consciousness, the gradual evolution of the mind, human mind, that gives rise to different levels of understanding of what an incarnation is. Now, there is another theory which, or not theory, there is another idea that Swami Sarvasthananda says. Since most of these incarnations have come in human form, avatarana means coming down from the divine plane to the human plane, so that you can feel some kind of uh, similarity. So Swami Vivekananda was once asked, why, how can God come as a human? He said it's a conception of a human mind that he can visualize God as a superior type of human being who is far more powerful than us. He said, for example, suppose there is a big buffalo and you ask the buffalo, in the buffalo's imagination, God will be a big, huge buffalo. Naturally, the conception that they have, any species has, including human beings, is the best of their species. But that is just the beginning of our spiritual journey. So, the same thing is applicable according to Swami Shardananji in the Avtara's life. So, when they are born, just as they have a birth, whether you call it as an immaculate birth or immaculate conception or any other way, of course they are in flesh and blood. They say the word of God has become flesh for our sake because we can understand only the language of the flesh, the language of human beings. So when the incarnation comes, Shardanji says in his great master that right from childhood, the difference between our childhood and the childhood of these great incarnations, which you can see in Krishna, in Rama, and all other gods and goddesses, that they know there is now and then they perceive the world in a different way and make quick progress. If you see most of these incarnations before they were young, as youth, they manifested their spiritual powers much more than aspirants will normally do. Most of us take to spirituality when we reach an age where our understanding matures. Though in the earlier days, the Gayatri Mantra was given at the age of between 6 and 8, it was mandatory to just give a push to the spiritual life of the child along with secular education so that by the time he is a teenager, he knows, he has some background of what spiritual life is really about. But that is a bygone age. We do not have that kind of samskara in our households anymore. But at least even at a younger age or even at a middle age, when we come across these ideas, we try to develop them, try to understand them in our own way, quickly or slowly, because depends on the intensity with which we take up to spiritual life. Our progress will depend on our intensity. It is not necessary that one can begin at any age. You've seen there are so many saints. If you see, like Tulsidas, for example, he was a married person, very much attached to his wife, and he was almost middle age when there was a sudden transformation, and that too because his wife scolded him and literally asked him to get out of the house. Because he was so much attached to his wife that he even went to her his father-in-law's house. She had gone to see her parents and he could not live. He wanted to bring her back and he swam through dangerous flooded river and crocodiles, and with great danger he somehow managed to reach his wife's home, parents' home, asking her to come back. And then that lady got terribly angry, Tulsidas's wife. He was such a worldly person, a middle-aged person, you can imagine. And she scolds him. He said, "What kind of attachment you have towards me? If you had even a partial attachment towards God, the attachment you have for me, you would have realized Rama." That is what she says. That came as a big blow, a slap on his face. And from that moment, Tulsidas just leaves the house and never again goes back to his house and becomes a great devotee who wrote the Tulsi Ramayana. So it's not necessary that from childhood these samskaras should be cultivated, though it is desirable. But very often it so happens that the turning point can come at any time. Even Valmiki, for example, who wrote the Valmiki Ramayana, he was a robber, he was a dacoit, he used to kill people. It is only because his wife, children, and parents told him, it was the shock of his life when he, Narada told him, "You go and ask your parents and your for whom you are killing and robbing people. Ask them if they would partake of the sins of whatever you are doing." So he goes back and he says, obviously they have to take because I am earning for them. It's not for me that I'm killing people or robbing people. But when he reaches his home, the parents first say, "No, no, how you earn the money is your problem. You are doing, how can we partake of your sins? You can earn by honest means, but if you are doing that, it's not." So they disown him. Then his wife disowns him. The children also say, "No, we have nothing to do." Then he gets a lot of, he gets is disillusioned. That these are the people for whom I am working, and they say we have nothing to do. So he gets vairagya, and then this robber, this great robber or dacoit, becomes a saint. He decides to give up everything and focus on the essential thing that will give him what he wants, and then finally becomes the great Valmiki who wrote the Ramayana. So it is not necessary, as they say, most of the childhood manifestation of avatars like Krishna, Ramakrishna also, we are coming to the biography where some of the divine attributes were seen in childhood. But normally their childhood is like like other children of the village. He was mixing with them, he was playing with them, he had his own doubts, fears, and so many things, so many wonderful events have happened in the childhood. But Chardananji says they pursue objects in the realm of ideas, the ideas with which they are born to disseminate to the whole world. They are conscious of that. So now and then, just as Sri Krishna revealed himself to Yashoda now and then, showing his glorious power. Once it seems she caught him stealing butter. So she asked him, he said, "No, no, I have not stolen." She said, "Open your mouth." So when he opened the mouth, she saw the whole cosmos in his mouth, and it was such a powerful vision. For some time, she could not believe what she was seeing. But then immediately Sri Krishna withdrew that form, divine form of his. And they say later on she again forgot. The memory was so short lived that she continued to treat him as a human being. So also though they experienced these spiritual visions, which we'll discuss, a few visions which Sri Krishna had while he went into ecstasy when he played the role of Shiva, and also he saw a flock of cranes against the black backdrop of the clouds. So many things happen, but though they have come down from that non-dual plane of Brahman, they have come down so much to our level so that they look as if they are ordinary human beings. But now and then, even as children, they give they experience these visions, though it is not as frequent, as the visions they have when they grow up, but still, and some of the people, for example, Chinu Shakari, who was a very humble shopkeeper, he could understand the greatness of Sri Ramakrishna. So one day he quietly prepared a wonderful garland and worshipped him, saying that I know you are an incarnation. So now and then he and some other people had a glimpse, but others all thought he's just a playful child who has come here. So Swami Shardan is trying to explain that these Jivan Muktas or incarnations, even it is true for Jivan Muktas, they have attained liberation while living. The difference between a Jivan Mukta and that is one who realizes after a long struggle and the incarnation is for them a lot of effort they have to put, and after perhaps that before they die, few years or a few decades before they die, they reach that Jivan Mukti, state of Jivan Mukti, and then they see the world as an illusion and a play, not before that. Whereas for the incarnation, that consciousness, that is why there's a wonderful song by a famous Muslim poet. He has written a lot of songs on Krishna and Kali and others. Qazi Nazrul Islam. He wrote a lot of songs. So he in one of his songs on Krishna, it is such a beautiful uh, song. It is in Bengali, but the meaning is this: in this world, this divine child is playing with playful abandon with all the creatures, with all the children, with all the people. But he knows that it is, after all, a play. He doesn't take this creation or the world to be real. He just considers it to be a play, knowing fully, being fully aware, this divine child continues to enact his divine play. So, similarly, the poets everywhere they have explained the different aspects of an incarnation's life, like the child Rama, the child Krishna, and all the other children who, divine children, who, though they were, had all the characteristics, all the human characteristics of other children, they now and then could ascend to a higher consciousness, higher plane whenever they wanted, but not for long. They would come down again. The difference between these Jivan Muktas and the incarnation is just a degree, of one of degree. A Jivan Mukta perhaps would not demonstrate all these things, but he quickly does make progress in his sadhana. His consciousness is easily raised as compared to the other sadhakas who have to struggle, and maybe not in this life, but it may take several lives for us to even raise our consciousness. But the Jivan Muktas, at least it's just a question of degree between an ordinary sadhaka, a Jivan Mukta sadhaka, and an incarnation. So that is what uh, Swami Shardananji says. So now, what are the other characteristics of an incarnation? You see, this book is so comprehensive, Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, that he anticipates, Swami Shardananji anticipates that a rational mind, especially a mind with a scientific approach to everything, a rational approach to everything, will put these questions. So you can't just bypass or brush these doubts. When you say you have to have faith and believe, that is not the path Swami Shardananji wants us to take. He says, don't believe because somebody tells you to. Then that belief, if it is based on some dogmas, certain being born into a particular faith, and you think you are eternally, you have to owe allegiance to that faith, whether you are convinced or not, then you can't make much progress. Either you become an atheist, which now you see the statistics, if you see most of the countries, if it doesn't satisfy the reason, their religious faith is no longer accepted by the successive generations. They believe that we need something, some rational explanation of why we should follow the faith that we are born into. What is, why should we do it if it is not helping us, if it is not satisfying our curiosity? That's how they just say that it's better to be an atheist and pursue our scientific approach to life in whatever subject or, but that is not the solution because nobody has attempted, most of the, not nobody, most of the people have not attempted to place spirituality on a firm scientific basis. By scientific basis, I mean not the material science, but an approach to truth based on reason. So every stage of the spiritual journey, if there are logical issues or if there are rational issues which need to be addressed, that faith or that religion or that spiritual uh, scripture has to somehow satisfy your curiosity. Otherwise, there is a likelihood that one will abandon. Because faith is not such an easy thing to have, especially for a rational man. So, faith based on conviction is what is known as Shraddha in our Hindu scriptures. They say just faith is not enough because that faith is based on flimsy ground, it doesn't have a foundation. Just because my ancestors followed a particular religion, you may question why should I do? My parents may be doctors, but that doesn't mean I should be a doctor. I can be something else what I choose to be. So, does my spirituality, my quest for spirituality, allow that? That is the question. Does my quest for spirituality answer all my questions as I want my questions to be answered? When I choose a career, when I say that, oh, no, I don't want, just because I am born, my parents are doctors, I don't need to be a doctor. So also, I may be born in a particular sect or a religion, but if that religion or that sect or the ideas which belong to that sect, if they don't satisfy my questions, my curiosity, there's no reason why I should be forced to follow it. That is what is happening in the world now. If proper answers are not given, our questions are not answered, the spiritual values are, its relevance to our life, because so many things pass by the name of religion. It's just many of the things are so ritualistic. He doesn't criticize. Swami Sarvasthananda says, you begin with the kindergarten of religion. Rituals are necessary, the prayers and all those things. But at some stage, just as you graduate from kindergarten to different standards and then you go to the master's degree and PhD, you have to continuously evolve. So a incarnation shows this evolution in his one single life. He evolves from an ordinary child to a ordinary youth, but with special qualities, and then he shows how quickly one can evolve into a divine being. So, for that demonstration, a demonstration of how the convictions or the ideas are converted into concrete spiritual experiences, verifying them in his own life and then asking others who want to follow that example to follow a particular path and verify it. Just as a scientist says, you follow just exactly what I did and all the theories that I have established. You can see for yourself. You don't have to believe because I study or I am a professor of a particular uh, branch. You have to follow the methods that I followed and got my experiences, got my experimental verification. So that is what they say. They are fully aware. Otherwise, what's the difference between an incarnation, a Jivan Mukta, and an ordinary sadhaka? Why do we have to revere them? There are some people who say, I don't believe in God. I don't even, in fact, Buddha said, I don't need uh, to believe in a God. When he was asked whether you believe in God, he said, "Did I say I believe in a God?" So they thought he perhaps did not believe in a God. But when he was asked, so that means you don't believe in the existence of a God. He said, "Did I say I do not believe in the existence of God?" So when his point was that don't go into these discussions whether God exists, God does not exist. I I have discovered a way. You follow that, a scientific way to reach the highest truth. Whether there is a God, what is his nature, or whether there is no God, it doesn't make, there's no point in arguing and quarreling. That is his method, Buddha's method. But there are different methods to approach truth. So, we will conclude now. The time is almost over. So, if there are some questions, you can just see. Yeah, so that is the conclusion. Swami Sardananji, he says these incarnations are special, they belong to a special category of human beings who take an incarnation, no doubt, come down to our level, but show the way to ascendancy very fast so that they set an example. Sri Ramakrishna said, I have done 16 parts. Just as a comparison, he said, you just have to do 1/16th of what I do and you will realize the same truth. That means they do it for the benefit of humanity. They do it on a much faster and a quicker scale than what we can do. But that doesn't mean it is impossible. It's a question of degree, not a question of it's just a question of difference in the degree of realization, but we can expect as human beings, as followers of that particular incarnation, to experience those same truths, may not be as fast as them, but to the extent our yearning increases, our aspiration increases, we can expect to realize the same truths in our life. Okay. Any question? This is Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. It's a biography. You cannot say it's just a biography because it does not just describe the events of the wonderful life of Sri Ramakrishna, but Swami Sardanji has taken the pains, divided the book into 5 parts to show how a biography has to be studied. So there is an English word which believe which in the English language, English literature, there is one is a biography and then there is a hagiography. Hagiography is what hagiography, which is normally used to describe the lives of saints. It's a initially hagiographical writings were based on the great saints, where just a description of the events of the life of that person or that saint, his or her life is not given, but an explanation, the significance and its relevance to humanity is explained. So here we cannot say this is just a biography because every incident, right from childhood, first he gives the background of what an incarnation is or what an incarnation is capable of doing, and then takes the different phases of his life. In this case, there are 5 different phases. He has divided the life into 5 different parts in the original Bengali, which has been translated as the Great Master. So that is what we are discussing every alternate Sunday. And the other Sunday, we discuss the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. So uh, teachings as well as the biography or the hagiography together give a complete picture of what, as Max Muller said, his book has been named. Max Muller, who wrote the first English biography of Swami Vivekananda published from Oxford, was named Sri Ramakrishna, his life and his sayings. So it was not just life. He wanted the sayings or the teachings to be appended to the life which he wrote, which he published, so that we can understand the sayings in the context of his own life. So that is what Swami Shardanandji has done in the Great Master. And in fact, he was the one who provided all the material for writing the biography to Max Muller, Sir Max Muller, who wrote the first English biography. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.